record. Okay, so we're now recording. This is the meeting of the traditional Buddhist chanting class. We are in the um, process of discussing the chant, the homage to the three jewels. This is actually the fourth time that we've met to discuss this chant, so it's be our last one. The next chant that we will start on the first Tuesday of July will be the Heart Sutra. Joe is here now. So I'm going to, in this class, we're going to start with chanting the homage to the three jewels together. And then we'll proceed to talk about it. We'll have a break at 7:35 for 5 minutes, and then we will end at 8:15, or maybe like at 8:12. We'll chant the Great Dharani together to end the class. But now everybody can see my screen, right? And everyone can hear me, right? Good. It's all good. So now I'm going to start the chant. Let's do it.
지심금명예 시 원경 법계 제중생 자타 일시 성불 도
Okay, so you can hear me still, right? Good. Now, while it's still fresh in our minds, let's look at that last part of that chant that we just did. And so, uh, so before I dive right in, which I'm halfway through the process of diving right in already, but still, if anybody has a question or something you want to bring up, um, if you've got something on your mind about this chant or any of the other chants we've talked about or will be talking about, uh, you can ask now. And it's not like, if not now, then forever hold your peace. You can interrupt me at any time during the class, bring up anything if something comes up to you or you decide you want to ask something. Um, but at the very end of the chant, we've finished the 7 prostrations. We've done the prostrations to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. We've also done prostrations to the 4 great bodhisattvas. We've also done prostrations to many of the great teachers and disciples of the Buddha. Um, I don't know, it adds up to 7. But then there's one final prostration at the end, which when we do Yuon, everybody bows together, Yuon, Mujin, Sambo, Deja, Debi, right at the end. What are we saying when we do that? Well, that's what we're going to go through in this class. And we're going to go through it in a little bit of detail, hopefully not too much detail, but it's good to know what this is really a part of the chant where understanding what's being said is quite significant. This is basically at the end of the chant. This is a statement of what in Sanskrit is called bodhicitta, and this is the ultimate aspiration for all those on the bodhisattva path, which is the path to Buddhahood. Um, it's a yeah. There's a lot to the concept of bodhicitta. It's like compassion, but uh, uh, compassion for all beings taken as far as it can go, which means really and truly desiring that all of the suffering of all the beings throughout all of the universe be relieved. And that is only possible. So now I'm giving away the ending, but it is only possible if all beings throughout all the universe become Buddhas, become enlightened. That's the only way to end suffering completely. And so it's pretty out there actually. It's not really any further out there than when we recite the 4 great vows, and there'll be times um, in the course of this class where I'll make reference to at least one of the 4 great vows. But if you there's different English translations of the 4 great vows, but um, sentient beings are numberless. We vow to save them all. You know, uh, the uh, the the greed, hatred, and ignorance, or let's see, different ways. The kleshas is really the correct translation of that. Um, but all of the things that cause suffering are endless. We vow to extinguish them. Delusions are endless. We vow to extinguish them as another. Some people say the passions are endless. We vow to extinguish them. A lot of people don't like that translation. Then we say that the teachings are infinite. I vow to learn them all. And then at the very end, which is basically what we're saying in this part uh, of the homage to the 3 jewels, the Buddha way is inconceivable or unsurpassable. We vow to attain it. Okay, so let's see. Go ahead, Camille.
I was just curious,
Mhm.
when you mentioned like sentient beings,
Yep.
that's definitely something that um, has come up in like a lot of different texts that I've read, and
Uh-huh.
I feel like I'm not entirely sure
Mhm.
what we mean the definition
Yes.
to be, because
Uh-huh.
like from a scientific standpoint, sentience is just like, can you respond to stimulus? So like plants would
Exactly.
be sentient by that, but
Mhm.
I think it's tied up with like not doing harm or like not killing. I don't know. I was just wondering if
Mhm.
you could talk a bit about what that
Yeah.
means.
So the English phrase "sentient beings" is actually it's not a Buddhist term. It is a legitimate phrase in the English language. The definition that you just gave, the ability to feel basically, and in particular to feel pain, um, but the ability to feel is what sentience is. And so that sentience, as opposed to being able to think logically and rationally like human beings supposedly do. I mean, although there's not much evidence for it, but um, the so uh, actually one of the first times that the phrase sentient beings occurred in the English language was when uh, Jean-Jacques Rousseau's essay on what was it? What is this essay? Which one? I think it was the one on inequality. Anyway, when it was translated into English, Jean-Jacques Rousseau has a little spiel in there about how we shouldn't just treat human beings properly. We should have compassion for all things that can feel pain, sentient beings. Um, and anyway, so I could go on and on about sentient beings, but actually in Chinese, in the Chinese version, and we'll talk about this. There's a little sentient being flying around in here right now, as a matter of fact. Um, it's all beings. And actually, I have a friend that Elizabeth also knows, who started a Zen group in Adams Morgan, uh, in Washington D.C. And their sitting group, their Zen group is called the All Beings Abode. And I think originally um, there was some idea they were going to call it the Sentient Beings Abode, but anyway, but all beings is actually broader than sentient beings. We're not saying that they have to be sentient. So in Chinese, the literal Chinese is everything that is alive. And so what does that mean? And actually, in 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 Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, Japanese, East Asian Buddhism generally, uh, the sentient beings can be extended even further to include inanimate objects, even the wind, clouds, mountains, rivers. Um, but that's anyway. So you can and so and so you can think of it however it makes sense to you. Whatever these beings are, whatever you feel compassion for, is good. Uh, and you can also, if you really want to, you can go on the internet and argue with people about it, because different people have different opinions about who's a sentient being, who has Buddha nature. Do plants have Buddha nature? Are plants sentient? Um, but it isn't just a matter of arguing about it. It's actually a quite interesting question, and it is, a fundamental issue in Zen Buddhism in particular. Does a dog have Buddha nature? Um, and that is, well, how would you know? And the only way you can know is by having some insight into your own Buddha nature. But anyway. So, what is a sentient being? Does a dog have Buddha nature? These are excellent questions. Um, and we shouldn't just take for granted that we know what that means. So in this class we're going through these and we're looking at what the words mean, but every time we have an explanation of what the words mean, that's just scratching the surface. um, if you want to say what do those words really mean, and let's look at some of them. Okay, so at the very beginning of this part of the chant, at the very end, at the very beginning of the end of the chant, when we say Yuon Mujin Sambo Deja Debi, you is a word that means only or just, and one is a word that means, it can mean vow, it can mean wish, desire, or aspiration. It can also mean so in the sense of something that is wished for or desired, when it's combined with the word you, meaning only or just, it is a way of making a very polite, respectful request. And so this part of the chant is addressed to the three jewels. This is the homage to the three jewels chant. This is the culmination. This is the, you know, um, we have done all the prostrations to the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, the teachers, the disciples, the great bodhisattvas, and now we are envisioning all of them as being under the general heading of the three jewels, and so which is comes in this line as well, Sambo. But first, we only ask in the sense of one could even say we humbly ask. That's not a literal translation, but that gives a feel for and who is this being directed at? So again, the fact that we bow while we're saying this goes along with the sense of what we're saying. We only ask. Mujin, which is another phrase that's also found in the Four Great Vows. I think it is, I won't try to remember, but Mujin means without uh, limit. Didn't even put it in here. Huh. Okay. Without limit. Mu, without, jin, end. Actually, I think, let me make sure I know what I'm talking about here. So I know this so well that I forgot to really check it. I'm going to look it up right now in real time. Jin, yeah, is end. So without end. Mhm. Mujin Sambo. And what is without end? Well, it's the great love and great compassion of the three jewels. So that's what this whole thing means. We only request, and our request is being made to the a limitless great to the well to the three jewels whose great love and great compassion is limitless. The Chinese is not big on things like prepositions and um, you know things that connect the words together. Um, but we know that the three jewels have great love and great compassion, and that the three jewels themselves and or their great love and their great compassion are without end, and we are making this request. And there's a couple of interesting things. Oh, yeah. So this word, you, as a qualifier, meaning only or just, shows up in another interesting place. This is from a very famous, important Zen poem by the third Chinese ancestor of Zen, Sun Chan, or Sen Chen, sometimes he's called. Um, his poem "Faith in Mind." I think the Mandarin is something like "Sing Sing Ming," or anyway. But this is the line: "Jido Munan Yu Hyom Yun Tek," which means the ultimate way. This is the ultimate way, is without difficulty. Only please don't pick and choose. That, it's usually translated more like the supreme way is not difficult for those who do not pick and choose. But if you compare it to the way "you" is being used here in the Homage to the Three Jewels chant, it's really a little bit. It's not so much a command or an instruction. It's saying, really, the great way is not difficult. Just please stop, imposing your likes and dislikes on everything, and you'll find that the great way is not difficult. Of course, most people find getting rid of our likes and dislikes is extremely difficult. I know I do. Anyway, oh, uh, okay, and the character one, which off, which also means vows, it shows up earlier in the Homage to the Three Jewels in the section on the four great bodhisattvas, because one of the four great bodhisattvas is Kshitigarbha, who is the bodhisattva of great vows. And when we say, let's see, day one, yeah, bonjon, jijang bosal, day one, bonjon, ji, yeah, I think this is what we say. Yeah, so that shows up there. All right, so we only ask that the three jewels, and so I think when at the end of this tonight's class, we'll kind of wrap it all up and see how it all comes together in something that is both grammatically English, but is as close as possible to the, what's actually what we're actually saying. And we kind of have to say something like, we only request that out of their infinite love and compassion for sentient beings, or for us, that the three jewels, and then what is it we're asking them? Okay, this is who we're asking it of, and what are we asking of them? Oh, but no, I've got more to say about the three jewels, and in particular about Deja Debi. Okay, so Deja Debi kind of raises an interesting issue. Both of these can be translated into English as compassion, Ja and Bi. But when they're used together, it emphasizes that there's more than one thing that can be understood by compassion. And in fact, there's four things that are important for compassion in Mahayana Buddhism, and Ja and Bi are two of them. They're especially emphasized for Avalokiteshvara, and in this case for all three jewels. So let's go through these. Ja is loving kindness, or in Pali it's metta. If you've heard of metta, the Metta Sutra, or in Sanskrit it's Maitri, and this is the desire for all beings to be happy. And so this is considered to be the kind of the starting point for the compassion of a bodhisattva. It starts with the desire for all beings to be happy. But a lot of beings are not happy. And so the second part of this is the desire for all beings to be free of suffering, or actually another way of expressing this, which is actually closer to what we usually think and mean by compassion, and what the word compassion literally means, is that when others suffer, we suffer. We feel the suffering of others, um, and uh, and so actually B is, because of that, B is often translated into English as sadness. Sadness, not just kind of being sad because you didn't win the lottery, or because you have to go to work tomorrow, but sadness because of the suffering of others. Um, Beings. So this is it's often said, this desire for beings to be free from suffering, which is not as positive of a way of putting it as the desire for all beings to be happy. Okay, but it's kind of completing it. It's like, okay, we desire all beings to be happy, and if they're not happy, then we feel their suffering, we feel their sadness, and we feel sad because all beings are not happy. But then, no matter how bad things are, we're not always unhappy, right? What about when others are happy? And so this is actually the third of the aspects of compassion of a bodhisattva, which is in Sanskrit it's called mudita. It's often translated into English as empathetic joy. And empathetic joy is literally what this is. It means taking joy in the happiness of others. So you want all beings to be happy. Often they're not. And so this makes Avalokiteshvara and all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas sad. But whenever beings are happy, all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas rejoice in their happiness. Because why? Because they want us to be happy. So, and this is actually very important. The opposite of mudita, the opposite of which in Sino-Korean is pronounced hui, is envy, which is an extremely common human experience. You see someone who's happy, do you rejoice? Or do you say, what are they so happy about? Or maybe they're happy because, they have a really nice car and you have a crappy car, or whatever. Or they're rich and you're not rich. We don't, it's an interesting practice to take up consciously, to rejoice in the happiness of others without judgment, um, which is also necessary when we feel sad for the suffering of others. That also has to be without judgment, because it's easy for us to say, well, they deserve it, or they can get over it, or they should just get out. They should just pick themselves up by the bootstraps, or whatever. Um, anyway, okay. And so the final, these are called the four immeasurable minds, four without measure minds. Sa mu riang shim. Um, and the final one of these four immeasurable minds is equanimity, which in Pali is upekkha and in Sanskrit is upeksha. And equanimity, it doesn't mean you don't care. The first three of these immeasurable minds are all about caring. Equanimity is with respect to one's own situation. So equanimity means being unconcerned with one's own happiness or suffering. Again, not an easy practice, um, but sometimes in Buddhist teachers talk about exchanging self for other, exchanging oneself for others, which means what I just described. When others are suffering, you're sad. When others are happy, you feel joy, and you're not concerned with your own happiness or suffering. Um, anyway, so Deja, Debi, uh, to some extent implies all four of these, um, but it specifically focuses on the root of these four immeasurable minds, and also on the fact that, yeah, we live in a world full of suffering. And so we should feel compassion for suffering beings. And any questions on that, or complaints, or it's an interesting teaching. And one of the things that's cool about this chant, the Homage to the Three Jewels, is there's a lot of interesting Buddhist teaching that's kind of embedded in it once you start looking at it. And all of these are like Camille's question about sentient beings. This is just scratching the surface. The four immeasurable minds are, to understand the four immeasurable minds is to be a fully enlightened Buddha. But it's good to have a little idea about them. Okay, and so this slide is just emphasizing that the phrase Deja Debi is almost inevitably associated with Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. And in fact, if you do a Google image search, just that's what these pictures are down here. If you just go to Google and you put in these characters, Deja Debi, and say, show me pictures, and these are the first, this is the first line of hits that comes up from that search. And that's, if you think you know what a Chinese character or a group of Chinese characters means, often this is a good check on, or if you're, or if you don't know what, if you see two characters or even one character, and you think, what does this mean? You can look at, you can look it up, Google it, and get a definition from some online source. But it can be very helpful to see the pictures. I'm kind of a picture-oriented person, I guess. Okay, so it is 7:33. Let's get started on the next. So that was, let me just back up a little bit. We're going through this last section of the chant, Yuan Mujin Sambo Deja Debi, Sua Jong Ye Myeong Hun Ga Pirok, Won Gong Boep Ke Jung Seng, Jata Il Shi Song Bulto. And we finished Yuan Mujin Sambo Deja Debi. And so the next one is, this. Sua Jung Ye Myeong Hun Ga Pirok. And so this is a literal translation of the characters. This is kind of an interesting one to look at in terms of the literal meaning. Receive our head ritual. Head ritual. Yay. The chant is called in Korean Ye Bo, the whole chant, which means Buddhist ritual, basically. Ye has a lot of different meanings. One of the ways that is often the best way to translate it into English is ritual, and head ritual in Chinese is prostration, basically. Now I'll show you that again. This is another case where doing a Google image search on these two characters together, you see pictures of people bowing and bowing all the way down and putting their head on the ground. Hun ga pirok is Myeong Hun ga pirok. Now, the, this starts to get a little bit weird, actually, and sorting out this part of the chant, which we will do. We'll take a 5-minute break, then we'll come back. We'll start on this, and then we'll get to the next line, and we'll try to put it all together and see what the whole thing means, which again is we can only scratch the surface of, but we can look at it. We can look at it together. 5-minute break. Okay, I am unmuted now, and we're starting again. Any questions? Okay, all right. So I do, let's see, what do I want to do here? Yeah, I'm going to push this. Yeah, I'm going to go back a little bit. Yeah, put this over here. I just want to show at the same time the four great vows and this section of the Homage to the Three Jewels that we're looking at. There's a tremendous amount of overlap in terms of the words that are being used in the original. So we have one is of course one is one of the characters in the Chinese word for vow, um, uh, and so it shows up obviously throughout the four great vows. We have Mujin, which is in the second great vow. You see this, so I'm using my website, the Writing the Ox web application. If you hover over one of the lines in the four great vows, little thing shows up that gives the English translation. So afflictions are without end. We vow to cut them off. So this Mujin in in the first line in this last part of the Homage to the Three Jewels is the same as the second vow when we say afflictions or greed, hatred, and ignorance, or delusions, or whatever, are endless or without end. Anyway, then also, let's see what else. Oh yeah, oh no, nothing there. And then one again, and then Dharma Realm. Oh yeah, and then sentient beings. Okay, sentient beings, of course, is in the first vow, and yeah, the Buddha way. The Buddha way is in the fourth vow, and not just the Buddha way, but vowing to attain the Buddha way. So that's anyway. There's probably even more overlap, but that's what I can see right off the bat. Now, oh yeah, here we go. So do we get to? All right. Anyone? Oh, that's Sung Chan. Okay, good. All right. Suajong ye myung hun ga pirok. So receive. So su just means receive, which is this character right here. And it's on the one hand, it's pretty straightforward, but it has another meaning. In the Heart Sutra, which we're going to start talking about in 2 weeks, I think. This is the character for feelings in the Heart Sutra. When we list the skandhas, forms, feelings, perceptions, impulses, consciousness, this is the character for feelings. But it also means to receive. And so in the Homage to the Three Jewels chant, it means to receive. The second skandha, feelings. Okay. In Mandarin, so this character is usually the character that people associate with the first person singular I in ordinary everyday spoken written Chinese, modern Chinese, but in a more formal or literary style, it's often used as the first person plural, our, and the the most logical way to interpret it here. I mentioned before, jung ye means literally head ritual, and that what's a ritual that you do with your head? Well, a ritual that you do with your head is to put your head down on the ground in a prostration, which we will look at that in more detail. Oh yeah, but then after jeong. So the first part is pretty easy. Receive our prostrations. That's the first thing that we're asking of the 3 jewels. Please receive our prostrations. Myeong hun literally means subtle, dark, or gloomy. Actually, this is a very nice possible meaning that I got from Paul Kroll's Dictionary of Medieval and Classical Chinese, a twilight state of mystical intuition. Which is another way of saying subtle, dark, or gloomy, right? And then the second character, hun, means smoke or fog. Now together you get, if you try to find out what they mean together and you try to I don't know, image searches or whatever, it can be very difficult to find out what character combinations really mean in different contexts. But in this context, it means that we're asking the 3 jewels to fill us up from within with their influence. And then the next 3 characters, da, pi, rok. The first one means put on top. The second one means to cover. And the third one means power. Ga, pi, rok. But this is a 3-character combination in Chinese that's used as a Chinese translation of the Sanskrit adhisthana. And actually, D.T. Suzuki had something to say about adhisthana in his book on one of his later books on the Shin sect of Buddhism. The idea of adhisthana is one of the Mahayana landmarks in the history of Indian Buddhism. And it is at the same time the beginning of the other power, Tariki, school as distinguished from self-power. And so in Japanese Buddhism, there's a lot of emphasis placed upon other power versus self-power. And I don't want to be, too judgmental, but that's a false dichotomy. Buddhists generally accept that there is other power and that there is self-power. The Buddha said, "Be a lamp unto yourself." Um, but people also, the Buddha taught, "Be a lamp unto yourself." If you look at those words, the Buddha is teaching that. We're receiving that teaching from the Buddha. He's telling us, "Be a lamp unto ourselves." So if we take that teaching to heart, we are also receiving that teaching from the Buddha. So that includes both self-power and other power. Ultimately, you have to figure it out on yourself. But I and most people find that we need a lot of help along the way to get there. And in this part of the homage to the 3 jewels, we are saying this points to going beyond self and other, which we'll get to. This is about, all of us all together throughout all time and space, all beings everywhere attain the Buddha way together. And so once you start thinking in terms of what Zen Master Sung San called together action, then there is no longer any self or other, self-power or other power. We're working together. Adhisthana is an interesting word. And you can just translate it as blessing, which is what I'm going to stick with for now. Or empowerment, or abhisheka, or something like that. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Okay. So now I'm going to show some pictures for a few minutes. This is what you get if you do a Google image search on these 2 characters, jeong. And it's pretty clear what it means. And these, for the most of these people are not just bowing; they're bowing all the way down and touching their head to the floor. That's not in every picture. This is an even more, this picture right here is an even more extreme form of prostration, which is not generally done in Korean Buddhism. It can be done, but in Tibetan Buddhism, it's very common for people to do a going beyond what is generally considered a full prostration in Korean Buddhism and stretching out all the way flat on the ground. Um, anyway, jeong head, and so jung isn't just head; it's the top of your head, or the crown of your head, or your forehead. So you should touch your head, top of your head, to the floor when you're doing your head ritual, your prostration. Now, namu is another Sino-Korean uh, Chinese phrase. It's literally it's a Chinese transliteration of nama or namo in Sanskrit, which means to bow. If you do a Google image search on these two characters, you don't get pictures of people bowing. You get pictures of things that one bows to. Is and also these are pretty clear. And this is without saying, "Hey Google, I want to see how these characters are related to um, Buddhism." This is just putting these characters in by themselves without any other qualifiers. So they are obviously in the Chinese language. These phrases are associated with Buddhism, with the practice of Buddhism. But Chinese people and Korean people and Vietnamese people and Japanese people bow as a normal course, as a normal part of their everyday lives. It's bowing is an important part of East Asian culture, and if you take a class if you study Mandarin or Japanese or Korean or Vietnamese, you're going to learn. You should learn to bow to your teacher. Students, I don't know, and there are different kinds of bows, right? Anyway, so that kind of bowing, social bowing, you could call it, or everyday, ordinary bowing that doesn't necessarily have any Buddhist connotations, is jugong in Mandarin. Uh, would you want to try to pronounce that, Camille? I can't give it. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but
No, it's all good.
actually, so the flat diacritics are usually not that hard to get. Gong, something like that. Um, and yeah, this just means to bow without any Buddhist or religious. It's a social convention of bowing, very important in East Asian culture, and doesn't necessarily have anything to do with Buddhism or with religion or anything of the sort. Um, but it turns out that if you take these two characters and you look up how they're pronounced in Korean, you get in Korean it's guk gong, guk gong. And if you do a Google image search on guk gong, you get pictures of people shooting not just any bows. These are traditional. This is traditional Korean archery. Um, so that's not the word that Korean people use for social bowing, for the social convention or the social nicety of bowing to each other. The Korean word for that is insa. Uh, and so if you do a Google image search on insa, then you get pictures of people bowing, not of people shooting bows and arrows. This is kind of interesting because the hanja, the characters for insa, are this is the character for person, which is very recognizable. This is the character for things or matter or affairs. And so it's usually said that these two characters together mean human affairs, but it really should be interpreted as, the correct way for people to behave. That is, people should show each other respect, which is what bowing is, not just for Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Okay. All right, so now we're on the last part of the ending of the homage to the three jewels, um, and let's see. Did we clarify what? Yeah, Suwa Jung Ye Myung Hun Ga Pirok. Please receive our prostrations and fill us with your blessing. basically is what this line means. Fill us, myeong is kind of fumigation from within or an inner influence. And we're asking that the three jewels accept our prostration and give to us their blessing, their gapirok, their adhisthana. And now, one gong bopke jung saeng, which is almost the end. A one again is vow again. Gong means together. So this is basically saying, and we also wish. So this is a second a statement of a wish. That together, bopge jung saeng. So bopge literally means Dharma Realm. Bop ge, Dharma Realm. So there's a wonderful chant in Korean Buddhism that Zen Master Sung-san taught people, the morning bell chant. At the very beginning of the morning bell chant, we say, the sound of the bell fills the Dharma realm. So Dharma realm basically means everywhere, everything, the whole universe. Or at least that's what I'm going to say it means, as far as I can tell. Also in the in the morning bell chant, there's lots of quotes from the Avatamsaka Sutra, and one of the main teachings of the Avatamsaka Sutra. This is a little long, but if you want to fully understand the three worlds and all Buddhas, you should view the Dharma realm, nature, all only mind made. They should view the entire universe as made by mind alone, is how this is usually translated. So Dharma realm means everything. And Jung Saeng means it means all sentient beings, each and every. It's more like each and every sentient being. So it's kind of for emphasis. Usually, you can say Jung Saeng for sentient beings, and which literally means everything born, or everyone who's born or who's alive. Jung Saeng just emphasizes that a little bit more. Each and every sentient being. One gong bopke jung saeng. Yeah, I went through that a little fast, but I'm going to keep going, get to the dramatic conclusion. Jata, so jata, this is interesting. Just as we said, each and every sentient being, jung saeng, jata literally means self and other. Self, ja, and other, ta. Ta is the third person singular pronoun in Chinese, meaning he or she. It can also just be, it just says, what is he or she? What does third person mean? It means not me, not you, it's the other. And so when combined with ja, which is the character that means oneself, it means, well, and especially when you combine it with each and every sentient being, myself and all others, basically is what this is getting at. It's just for further further emphasizing all beings everywhere, me and everyone else, and everything else. Ilshi, one time, literally means one time. In this instance, it means all at once. And then sung bul to, sung means to accomplish, achieve, complete, or succeed. It's what we're vowing in the four great vows when we say, depending upon the translation, the Buddha way is uncontrived. I vow to embody it fully. You could put accomplish, achieve, complete, succeed, embody fully. You could add that on here. The Buddha way. Oh yeah, and so this is. I put this on here. If you do a Google image search on this phrase, the Buddha way, Google gets confused because Google thinks that this character has to do with Buddhism, Bo, and it's the Buddha. And Google thinks that this character, Tao, has to do with Taoism. So usually, often when you do a Google search, and this is trying to say, oh, this has something to do with Buddhism and Taoism. And so there's a famous Chinese painting. Actually, this, technically speaking, this is a meme. This is an ancient meme. Long before Marvin Minsky was born, um, people started painting these pictures of what they called the three vinegar tasters, which is the Buddha, Confucius, and Lao Tzu, all, and they're not just tasting, they're actually making this vinegar together and tasting it, as they're the three cooks. um, but they're referred to here as the three vinegar tasters because the Buddha tastes the vinegar and it tastes bitter, because Buddhism is all about suffering, right? This meme was concocted by a Taoist, as will be clear at the end. So the Buddha tastes the vinegar and it tastes bitter. The uh, Confucius tastes the vinegar and it tastes sour, and Lao Tzu tastes the vinegar and it tastes sweet, because, of course, in Taoism, sees the whole universe as wonderful and natural. Yes. Anyway, so it's a it's a Taoist attempt to harmonize the teachings, or to portray the harmonization of the teachings of Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism. But of course, portraying Taoism as being actually the best, but the other two are okay as well. And in reality, vinegar, if vinegar was just sweet, it wouldn't be vinegar. Vinegar has to be sour, bitter, and sweet at the same time. That's what makes it vinegar. Um, and so, even though it does kind of give a little bit of preference to, and I can never figure out which one of these is supposed to be. I think this is Lao Tzu. I think this is Confucius, and I think this is the Buddha, but I'm not sure. Well, actually, no, this is probably the Buddha, because I think he's supposed to look a little Indian. And these two are both supposed to look Chinese. I'm not sure. Um, but yeah, so oneself and others all at the same time accomplish the Buddha way. And this is just, as I was pointing out before, this, especially this line of the end of the homage to the three jewels, is very close to the fourth great vow. All right. So now, here I am going to try to put it all together. Yuan Mujin Sambo De Ja De Bi. We only ask, Yuan, that the boundless three jewels, Mujin Sambo, out of their great love and great compassion, Deja Debi, Yuan Mujin Sambo Deja Debi, receive our prostrations, Sua Jung Ye, and fill us from within, Myung Hung, with your blessings, Ga Pi Rok. One Gong Boep Ke Jung Sang Jata Ilshi Song Bulto. And we also wish, one, that together, Gong, and this is a good example of uh, the way that Chinese is often very succinct. And we also wish that together, one gong, two words, two syllables, that throughout the Dharma realm, Bopke, every sentient being, or each and every sentient being, jeong sang, myself and all others, Jata, at the same time, Ilshi, attain the Buddha way, Song Bulto, which, is a great way to end a chant. Yeah. Okay. So, I think the next slide is just, the next slide is just reminding us of the schedule that we're on. This is the last class in June, and the next one in July and August we will be doing the Heart Sutra. And just as was the case with this last, including the four classes on the homage to the three jewels, we could spend a lot more than four classes talking about the Heart Sutra, obviously. But I'll try to figure out some way of dividing it up. And I would really encourage people to think of if you can, think of questions or subjects that you really want to address in the class on the Heart Sutra that's coming up. There's just, it's difficult to know where to start and impossible to know where to end when you start talking about the Heart Sutra. There's a lot to it. So let's see, how are we on time? Okay. I know that it looked like Joe was going to ask something at the beginning of class. Weren't you, Joe? No? Okay. Well, come up with
No,
no? Okay.
no.
Uh, are there any questions or comments? I could have done more, spent more time looking at all the different pictures. It's quite interesting to look at what um, uh, well, yeah. So there's actually one other kind of bowing or one other phrase for prostration that I didn't include in that kind of little summary, which is the one that we say at the beginning of each of the 7 prostrations in the chant, um,
Hmm.
which is Jishim Gui Myeong Ye, Jishim Gui Myeong Ye, which is and so this the first 2 characters, Jishim, is pretty straightforward, sincere mind. Gui Myung Ye is often just translated as homage, or sometimes this is actually translated as prostration. But if you do a Google image search on three these 3 characters, which oh god, this one means life, okay. This one means Ye is ritual, and this is what is that one? Do you know, Camille, or anybody else? I'm trying to remember now the literal meaning of this. I'm going to look it up right now. It means, oh, to return. Oh, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so to return life ritual. Um, yeah. So when people try to come up with a a way of getting from the literal meaning of each of these 3 characters to the sense of what it means in this context, they come up with all kinds of I don't know, of interesting ways of trying to do that, but it's poetry, and it's Chinese poetry, which is even worse, or better, or more weird. Return, life, ritual means prostration, and traditionally, each of these times in this chant, when when we say Jishim Gui Myong Ye, there's 7 of them, and when people who are fluent in Korean and who are well versed in the Chinese characters and who are fluent in English try to explain this to people, they say these are the 7 prostrations. Um, and so Jishim Gumyangye means to prostrate with a sincere mind, basically. Oh, and also, and this is very common in Chinese language, not just in Korea. This shows up in a lot of um, uh, uh, chants or practices of this kind. Going back to at least to, if not before, Xuanzang, the guy who wrote the Heart Sutra 1400 years ago, who wrote a nice little ritual paying homage to Maitreya. Xuanzang was a great devotee of Maitreya and wrote a really beautiful little 4-part uh, short, but in 4-part ritual, and each part includes this phrase "Jishim Gumyongye," but there he's paying homage to Maitreya or prostrating to Maitreya.
I was curious.
Yeah.
Since you brought up, I don't know, the 3 vinegar tasters or 3 vinegar makers, with kind of something that's commonly mentioned is like the middle way.
Mhm.
And I can never separate that in my mind from like the Tao, from the way.
Oh,
I was
uh-huh.
gone I don't know, like whether and I guess I've never delved into the history of how kind of the development of both at the same time might have led to kind of conflation between the 2,
Mhm.
or them kind of, I don't know, going off each other. Just curious.
Yeah. Well, so one thing that's interesting about that is that in Chinese Buddhism, which includes Korean Buddhism and Japanese Buddhism and Vietnamese Buddhism, Tao is used all the time. And it's often used interchangeably with Dharma. So Dharma and Tao, mean pretty much the same thing, at least to East Asian Buddhists and by extension Western Zen people. And so that leads some people to think, oh, well, this isn't really Buddhism, this is Taoism. And there's people who've written whole books about that, which and not to be judgmental, but that's just wrong. Um, the people who from the very early times of the introduction of Buddhism into China and from then on, um, they knew what they were doing, and they were doing what always has to be done. I mean, they were finding ways to explain and adapt the teachings of Buddhism in ways that people can understand, which you know is the very process that Westerners are grappling with so much right now. I mean, if the Dharma is no good unless people can both understand it and more importantly put it into practice, which means they have to be able to which means you do have to be able to understand it. You have to be able to relate to it. It has to use words that you understand. If you understand Tao, then it should use Tao. If you understand love and compassion and empathetic joy and words like that, then those could be used as well. Yeah, but um, yeah, and don't get me started on Confucianism. Confucianism is very interesting, and has had a tremendous influence on uh, uh, Buddhist development in East Asia. And a lot of times people think that that's even worse than the influence of Taoism, but I think it's quite, one of the reasons why I included that slide on what the Korean word for bowing is because that's very Confucianist, to say that people should behave correctly, which of course nobody likes to be told that because we don't like to be corrected in our behavior. But it is true. But we know that we want other people to behave correctly. We just don't want anybody telling us to behave correctly. Or at least I don't know. That's how I am. I don't want to project too much on anybody else. How are we doing? We are getting close to the end. We should uh, pay homage to Zen Master Sung San. In the uh, yeah in the homage to the three jewels, it lists a bunch of different types of people and individuals. Um, but the one of the groups of people who are mentioned is those who have made the Dharma available to us. Um, and so the chant that Zen Master Sung San is most associated with is the Great Dharani. And let's see, I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. I'll find that chant. Oh yeah, here it is. And no, that's not it. I've got like 5 different folders with chants in them. And then, of course, in each of those folders, I have like 5 or 6 versions of each chant. So, okay.
Bowls.
What's that?
Bowls.
Okay. Mm, Okay, found it. Sorry for the delay. I'm going to share my screen now and share the sound and mute myself.
묘장무대다라니 나모라다나라라야야 나마카야 바루기제세바라야 모지사다바야
Thanks for coming, everybody. I had a good
Thank-
time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Kurt.
See you next time. Maybe see you at the retreat this weekend. Anybody here going to be at the retreat on Saturday?
I will be.
Okay. See you there. And everyone else, I'm sure you'll be there in spirit. Bye, everybody.